There are times when history changes course and almost no one notices. Everything seems to go on as usual until one day you wake up and the world is no longer the same. Well, guess what? On the 17th of September, one of those events took place, a historic event, an event that could transform the global political architecture, something that could alter the military balance in the Middle East, and that could be the seed of a new international power group. And yet, it went largely unnoticed. No, this time we're not talking about Gaza, or Israel, or even Iran, but something quite different. On the 17th of September, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan sealed a historic agreement, a mutual defense partnership, the first formal agreement of its kind between two Muslim states. And keep in mind, we're not talking about the typical feel-good agreement or mere diplomatic posturing. No, this is something much bigger. It's a pact that could change the history of the Middle East, the role of the United States, and even the power play between India, Pakistan, and China. Keep that last one in mind. This is probably one of the most important news stories of 2025, perhaps even of the last decade, and yet virtually no one has noticed it. Of course, that's precisely what VisualPolitik is for. So why do we say this agreement could be so significant? Because we're not talking about a simple memorandum of military cooperation, we're talking about something much more ambitious, a NATO-style pact, an agreement whose text leaves no room for doubt. Any aggression against one of the countries will be treated as an attack against both. Does this remind you of NATO's famous Article 5? It should, because basically that's the spirit in which this mutual defense association came about. Many analysts already consider this agreement to be the precursor to an Arab NATO, an international Muslim military organization capable of defending itself against any threat and multiplying its power and influence across the globe. Because think about it, this organization would emerge with more than enough money, youth, and weapons to be taken seriously. And pay attention, because that's not all. Now comes the most explosive part. There's an additional element to this whole story that we cannot afford to lose sight of. Before we dive in, let me ask you, how often do you actually feel safe online? Because here's the truth, going incognito doesn't really make you invisible. Your internet provider, your workplace, even your home Wi-Fi router, all of them can still track everything you do. That's where CyberGhost VPN comes in, the sponsor of today's video. And it's not just any VPN. CyberGhost is one of the most trusted VPNs out there, with over 38 million users worldwide and more than 20,000 glowing reviews on Trustpilot. It hides your IP address and encrypts your data, so your browsing stays solely your business. Even CyberGhost doesn't keep logs of what you're doing. It's super easy to use. Just pick a location, they have over 100 available, turn it on, and you're protected. You can even unlock content that's not available in your country from over 40 platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney+. Traveling or working remotely, CyberGhost also helps you avoid sketchy public Wi-Fi risks, and even score better deals online by changing your virtual location. It works on pretty much everything: phones, laptops, tablets, even your smart TV and console. And one subscription covers up to 7 devices, so it's perfect for sharing. The best part, right now with the link in the description, you'll get a whopping 84% off, just $2.03 a month, and 4 extra months free. It's risk-free too, with a 45-day money-back guarantee, so there's nothing to lose. Go ahead, protect your digital life. Click the link, try CyberGhost, and stay one step ahead online. Pakistan is not just any country. With 170 warheads, it's one of the 9 nuclear powers in the world. And yes, this is the most important factor. The agreement extends Pakistan's nuclear deterrent power to the country led by Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia is now, for the first time, protected under a nuclear umbrella. Do you realize what this means? Basically, the Saudis have finally just bought their own nuclear defense system. And I say finally because they've been pursuing this move for years. In fact, in journalist Bob Woodward's book, War, published less than a year ago, there's already mention of a meeting between the Saudi Crown Prince and Senator Lindsey Graham. Well, at that meeting, Mohammed bin Salman told the American, and I quote, "I don't need uranium to make a bomb. I'll just buy one in Pakistan." And as you can see, that's exactly what he has done. VisualPolitik community, I've already told you, it seems to have gone unnoticed, but the implications of this alliance are absolutely massive. It's a declaration of intent that completely breaks the balance of power in the Persian Gulf. It opens the door to the creation of a Muslim NATO. It reduces Washington's role and influence in a way not seen in decades. And it's a blow not only to Tehran, but also to Israel. Now, the Saudis have their own large-scale deterrent capability, but the implications of this agreement are not limited to the Middle East. They could shape the future of the whole of Asia. Because with this pact, Pakistan is closely linked to an energy, religious, and financial superpower, which marks a turning point in the balance of power between Pakistan, China, and India. We'll be talking much more about this soon, because we've prepared this video so that we can understand what is happening and what this very important agreement may mean. What does it mean for Israel and the United States? How far does the new Saudi-Pakistani link extend? Why on earth are we talking about China and India in all this? Are we witnessing the birth of the greatest Islamic power the world has ever known? Well, today, let's see what these two major players can come up with. Stay tuned.
The new axis of Islamic power.
The first thing we need to do is get our bearings and remember who our two major players are. Saudi Arabia is much more than a desert full of oil. With 35 million inhabitants, it's one of the largest energy powers on the planet, and as the guardian of Mecca and Medina, it's also the great spiritual heart of Islam. But above all, in recent years, it has been a country in transformation. Its current de facto leader, Mohammed bin Salman, has set out to cure the addiction to oil by diversifying the economy, and in the process, putting Saudi Arabia on the map as a global political power. The formula for success? Vision 2030, a mega plan that is mobilizing hundreds of billions of dollars to modernize everything. And remember, the change is not limited to the economy. Saudi Arabia also wants political influence and to nip the threat posed by countries such as Iran in the bud. For a long time, they entrusted their security to Washington, but now they aspire to be self-sufficient. So what's the problem? They have a lot of money, but they often have serious problems spending it without wasting too much. This also includes their armed forces, one of the best funded armies in the world, but with many operational problems. Then there's Pakistan, which plays in a completely different league. With 240 million inhabitants, it is above all India's arch enemy, with whom it has a very poor relationship. But it is a loyal ally of China, and one of the 9 nuclear powers in the world. Its biggest difference with Saudi Arabia? Resources. Or rather, the resources it doesn't have. In fact, the country is mired in a severe economic crisis it just can't seem to escape, and it's not exactly aiming for modernization either. If anything, Pakistan is known for having a strongly fundamentalist approach when it comes to religion. Everything is subordinate to Islam. This is also true in Saudi Arabia, but lately, money has made things much more flexible there. Be that as it may, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia together could have more than enough capital, military power, religious influence, and demographic weight to make themselves heard. Together, they could become the great voice of the Islamic world. Now, it's not as if the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan has just started. It goes back a long way. This close relationship has a long history. For example, in 1998, it's known that the then Pakistani Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif, called Riyadh to speak to the then leader, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, and asked him a tough question. We have already completed our nuclear program, but we still need to test it. If we do, we'll be hit with a lot of sanctions. Can we count on Saudi support? The answer? 50,000 barrels of crude oil per day, completely free of charge, and extensive financial support that allowed Islamabad to weather the storm. And the truth? It wasn't the first time the Saudis had lent them a hand. In fact, the historic King Faisal gave the Pakistani government his blessing to embark on the race for the atomic bomb. And it wasn't just words. Since the 1960s, Pakistan has received a lot of aid from Riyadh, financial assistance, direct aid to the government, and tons of funding for schools, mosques, and all kinds of charitable programs. The relationship has been so close that few analysts doubt that Saudi money was absolutely crucial in enabling Pakistan to complete its nuclear program. If they have the bomb, it's thanks in part to Saudi petrodollars. But that's not where the ties end. In exchange for all this support, Pakistan has provided the Saudi royal family with crucial military assistance. At times, we could even say that Pakistan has been their main armed wing for staying in power. For example, it was Pakistani troops who guarded Saudi Arabia's northern border during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s to make sure the conflict didn't spill over into the kingdom. And not only that, since the late 1960s, it's been common in Riyadh to see all sorts of Pakistani military advisors training the Saudi army and, most importantly, protecting the royal family itself. In other words, a clear exchange. Money for security. Currently, a former head of the Pakistani army even commands an important Saudi-led counter-terrorism force based in Riyadh. Well, as I said, this has been the case for a very long time. But now, the mutual defense agreement that has just been signed takes it much further.
Until now, agreements were mainly protocols for joint training or the deployment of Pakistani troops to carry out specific functions within Saudi Arabia, but not comprehensive guarantees from Pakistan regarding Saudi defense.
Now, these two countries have a comprehensive military partnership with all that entails. Joint military exercises, shared military equipment development and manufacturing programs, the transfer of military technology, and of course, mutual defense, which, as I said before, includes the extension of the nuclear umbrella. In other words, we're at a turning point, a military alliance with a capital A, the first major Islamic military alliance. A blood pact in which Saudi Arabia will provide the petrodollars and advanced technology, purchased in turn with its checkbook, and Pakistan will provide the combat experience. Add to that, of course, its powerful arsenal of 170 nuclear warheads, and a host of ballistic missiles whose range, incidentally, could cover the entire Middle East in the case of the Shaheen 3 missiles, including Iran, including Israel. By now, I'm sure you're starting to see just how crucial all of this really is. Still, to fully grasp the potential of this partnership, there are still a few key points we need to keep in mind. And above all, we can highlight 4 big ideas. It seems the Israeli attack on the Hamas leadership in Doha changed everything. Suddenly, Arab countries realized how vulnerable they were. They were no longer just speeches or threats. Israel had just fired directly at one of the major Arab capitals in the Middle East, and they did so without the Americans lifting a finger. The feeling of weakness and the psychological impact hit hard. In June, Israel managed to take over Iranian airspace and bomb them morning, noon, and night. And now, given what we've seen in Qatar, it seems that no one is safe. Would Israel dare to fire on targets in Saudi Arabia if it deemed it appropriate? What if Iran were to attack the country? Would the US intervene or stand by and watch impassively? What if tomorrow Turkey wants to go much further in its ambition to control the Middle East? What if there's a regime change in Iraq or Egypt, and more radical factions of the Shiite movements or the Muslim Brotherhood take control? What would happen in all these scenarios? These are things that may seem implausible to us right now, but the Israeli attack has made one thing clear. No matter how much money you have, if you don't have military muscle, you're exposed. And the United States, well, let's just say it's no longer a reliable security partner. The result? In Riyadh, they've tried to cover their backs without counting on Washington, and at the same time, plant the seed of what could become a new pole of global influence. But speaking of American power, let me be clear, this is terrible news for Washington. For decades, the United States managed its relationship with Saudi Arabia as it saw fit. The deal was simple: petrodollars raining down on Wall Street and million-dollar contracts for the arms industry in exchange for security guaranteed by the Pentagon. It was a relationship that worked for a long time and contributed enormously to the power of the United States. But then, fracking changed everything. By becoming the world's largest producer of oil and gas, the US began to lose interest in its marriage of convenience with Riyadh. But clearly, no matter how little attention Washington paid, the Saudis didn't have much choice. Until now. Because this is very important. The security agreement with Pakistan gives the Arabs much more independence. For example, Pakistan obtains the vast majority of its weapons from China, which means that Saudi Arabia will sooner or later become more closely linked to the Chinese military-industrial complex. Yes, they will continue to buy lots of weapons from the United States, but there will no longer be as much dependence. The same goes for oil. Until now, the Saudis had no choice but to trade it in dollars. It was part of the agreement with Washington. Now, however, they will have much more freedom to trade in another currency, for example, perhaps in yuan or even in gold. And take note, if Saudi Arabia or the Gulf countries start selling oil outside the dollar, even partially, the blow to the US currency would be brutal. So this is obviously an incredibly valuable bargaining chip. And that's not all. Take a look at this map. The Saudi-Pakistani partnership opens the door to channeling Middle Eastern oil directly to China on a massive scale, without having to pass through critical points under US control, such as the Strait of Malacca. This is something Beijing has already been working on, but now everything will be much easier. In fact, China is a clear winner with this agreement too. More influence in the Middle East, more energy security, and more weight for its military industry. In a way, we are clearly witnessing the transformation of the world order. Because obviously, if this is good for China, it means it's not good for Washington. Now, do you know what the most ironic thing of all is? While they were preparing this move, the Pakistanis have been sweet-talking Trump and his entire family. How did they do it? Well, for instance, with agreements between the Pakistani government and World Liberty Financial to tokenize the country's wealth and operate without restrictions. And who's behind that company? That's right, the Trumps. In fact, this guy you see on screen, Bilal bin Saqib, Pakistan's Minister of Cryptocurrency and Blockchain, has become a key part of all negotiations with the United States. And yes, his essential role is to sweet-talk the Trump family. It seems he's not doing too badly. Not only that, but the Pakistanis are also constantly praising the president, including his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. The result, the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan, Azim Munir, was invited to a private lunch with the president at the White House this past summer. Draw your own conclusions. Of course, there are more losers. India is clearly the big loser. With this move, Pakistan, its eternal arch enemy, will get more dollars, more energy, and more resources. Plus, it will get a ton of political influence, especially when we consider that India is a huge buyer of crude oil, and that now the major crude oil producer in the Middle East will be much more closely linked to Islamabad, and that may only be the beginning. In other words, stopping oil purchases from Russia is no longer an option. And not only that, while this agreement is good for China, it's bad for New Delhi. As I said, it's the big loser. Although it's not good news for Israel either, its relationship with Pakistan is frankly poor, and now its enormous military superiority is being counterbalanced. This may limit its options in the long run. So India, the United States, and Israel. These are the three potential big losers with this agreement. All in all, this may be the most important consequence of this agreement in the medium term. With it, Riyadh and Islamabad could promote a kind of Islamic NATO, a military organization with a more than considerable budget and capabilities. An organization that would be tremendously influential in that it could act as a buffer between China and the United States. Think about it. If this agreement were extended to the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Jordan, or even, who knows, Egypt or Iraq, among other possibilities, the result could be a huge combat force, fairly well funded, and supported by almost unlimited resources, a nuclear umbrella, and excessive energy influence. A force capable of completely redefining global geopolitics, especially if it were to consolidate itself as the great epicenter of Islamic influence in global politics. Keep an eye out for this. That's why many analysts are clear about one thing. The agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia has the potential to change the rules of the game. Everything will come down to one question. Will this be the dawn of a new security bloc in the Muslim world, or a house of cards built on quicksand? VisualPolitik community, this is the question. The big question that only time will answer. Here on VisualPolitik, we'll be paying close attention. In the meantime, the question is over to you. What do you think of this move? How far do you think it will go? Who stands to gain the most, and who stands to lose the most? Leave us your thoughts in the comments. And once again, a big thank you to CyberGhost for sponsoring this video. For just $2.03 a month, you get full protection for your data and unrestricted access to blocked content around the world. Remember, you can try it completely risk-free thanks to their 45-day money-back guarantee. And by signing up, you're also helping support our content. Click the link in the description below. And don't forget to like this video if you found it interesting, and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already. All the best. See you next time.